In the heart of London, where drizzle turns the city into a canvas of gray, Clarence House sat hushed under the weight of history. Inside its paneled walls, King Charles III lingered in solitude, a man haunted by ghosts that never seemed to rest. On his desk lay a cassette recorder, battered and old, a relic from an age when words weren't dissected online within seconds, but hidden behind locked doors. His finger hovered, then pressed play. From the speakers, the unmistakable voice of Prince Philip cut through the silence. Stern, commanding, unflinching. You are sacrificing your crown for a woman the people will never forgive. Charles closed his eyes. Each syllable landed heavy, like iron striking iron. The words weren't just a rebuke, they had become prophecy. Every time he replayed the tape, it carved deeper into his conscience, reminding him of the choice that defined his life. Camilla over Diana, escape over responsibility. For years, he had buried the truth beneath ritual and duty, yet the world outside wasn't finished with him. The monarchy he inherited no longer commanded blind loyalty. Every misstep carried the weight of centuries, and now Diana's voice had returned, not through whispers or tabloids, but through something undeniable. Her own secret memoir, unearthed like a time capsule of pain. Within its handwritten pages, she had captured her despair. I was trapped inside an institution with no way out. I tried, but Charles's heart was never mine. Those words, raw and piercing, tore through the public like wildfire. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace despite the rain, waving placards with Diana's radiant face and chanting for justice. White roses piled against the gates, a belated tribute to the woman they still called their Queen of Hearts. The storm wasn't just about the past, it was about the monarchy's future. William and Harry had grown up in that storm, children caught in the crossfire of their parents' collapse. Now men, they carried scars that never healed. When Charles finally admitted aloud, "I never truly tried to save my marriage," William's stare cut like glass. It wasn't the look of a son, it was the judgment of a man who had lived too long with silence. Harry, fists clenched, trembled with fury too deep for words. For decades, they had lived with half-truths, with portraits of their mother reduced to symbols, while the reality of her suffering was brushed aside. Now, with Diana's own words rising from the grave, the illusion shattered. But the hardest blow wasn't the memoir, it was what followed. A recording slipped into Camilla's hands seemed to implicate her not only as the woman who divided a marriage, but as a manipulator who had maneuvered herself into the throne's shadow. Prince Philip's voice again, this time speaking of her directly. She will not stop until she has everything. When Camilla heard it, she faltered, her composure cracking for perhaps the first time in decades. Was it a warning from the past, or evidence of an enemy within the palace walls who wanted her gone? The palace corridors buzzed with whispers. Advisors debated furiously. Some urged silence, others begged for distraction. But Charles, weary of hiding, made his choice. He would speak. At Westminster Hall, before cameras and crowds, he gripped the lectern with trembling hands and admitted what no monarch before him had dared. Princess Diana deserved a depth of love and respect she did not receive. For that, I am sorry. Gasps echoed through the hall. Some wept, others raged, but all knew they were witnessing a moment no spin doctor could have scripted. For the first time, the mask of royalty cracked, revealing not a king, but a flawed man, confessing too late. In living rooms across Britain, millions debated whether it was redemption or betrayal. On social media, hashtags blazed "Justice for Diana," "Charles confesses." Outside, the protests swelled louder. For William and Harry, the words rang hollow, a salve offered long after the wound had scarred. For Camilla, it was worse than betrayal. It was a crack in the fortress she had built brick by brick, weathering years of contempt to stand crowned at his side. Now, Diana's shadow threatened to eclipse her again, and this time she vowed she would not be pushed into the darkness without a fight. The air inside Kensington Palace grew thick with tension as William paced before a tall window, rain streaking the glass like a painter's brush. Catherine sat quietly, her gaze fixed on her husband, her hands folded over Diana's old leather-bound diary resting on the table. When William finally stopped, his shoulders rigid, he turned and picked up the book. He opened to a page worn at the edges, the ink faded but powerful. "If I am gone, let William begin anew, but never let that woman near my children." His jaw tightened. The words weren't just his mother's plea, they were her command. He closed the diary, his voice low but resolute. Camilla isn't simply father's past, she threatens our future. Catherine reached for his hand, her voice calm yet steady. Then it's time to protect it, not just for us, but for the generations who will follow. Far across London, Camilla prepared herself before a mirror framed in gold leaf. She wore a crimson gown, chosen to project strength at the charity gala she insisted on attending despite the protests. Advisors had begged her to cancel, warning that anger in the streets was swelling. She silenced them with one phrase, "If I don't stand tall, they'll say I've already fallen." Yet even as she pinned on her diamond brooch, her hands trembled. The night ahead would not be one of triumph, but of confrontation. She stepped onto the stage at Royal Albert Hall, lights burning hot upon her. Instead of applause, a wall of boos and chants met her, echoing with Diana's name. Placards waved above the crowd, her rival's face staring back at her from every angle. She forced a smile, her voice composed as she spoke of charity and duty, but inside she was breaking. Behind the velvet curtain, she clutched her pearl-encrusted clutch so tightly that her nails dug into her skin. When an aide whispered that an old internal email had been leaked, one in which she demanded Diana's charities be curtailed, her knees buckled. The audience's jeers now carried an edge of fury. Her enemies were no longer faceless protesters. Someone inside the palace had turned against her. Meanwhile, Harry stepped off a plane at Heathrow, the sky above heavy with gray. He had not come for reconciliation. His expression, hard as steel, made that clear. At Clarence House, the study that once felt like a father's refuge now felt like a battlefield. Harry placed a black USB drive on Charles' desk. "Watch this," he said coldly. The video that played showed Camilla speaking to officials, her tone clipped and merciless. Harry and Meghan are no longer working royals. They do not require ongoing security. If they are at risk, so be it. Charles's face drained of color as he watched, hands trembling on the desk. Harry's eyes burned. Did she order this, or did you allow it? Charles tried to speak, his voice breaking. "I did not stop her. I thought it would keep the peace." Harry recoiled as though struck. "Peace? You call endangering my family peace? You call abandoning mother peace?" His voice cracked, anger giving way to anguish. Without another word, he turned and left, the door closing like a final sentence. Charles remained slumped at his desk, his crown a hollow weight on a man drowning in regret. Harry did not keep the recording to himself. That night, William opened an encrypted message from his brother. The video played in silence, its truth undeniable. For the first time in years, the brothers felt aligned, not in ceremony, but in shared fury. William pressed his phone to his chest, whispering, "Harry's right, we'll face her together." Catherine, watching the flicker of determination in his eyes, nodded. The storm inside the monarchy had sharpened into something more than protest, more than scandal. It was war within the palace walls, and the battle lines had been drawn. The royal council convened inside Buckingham Palace's grandest chamber, its gilded ceilings and marble floors unable to disguise the fracture at the table. William stood tall, his words carrying the weight of generations. The monarchy cannot survive under constant suspicion. Camilla's actions have placed us all at risk. His gaze swept the room, lingering on his father who sat hunched, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Camilla, dressed in muted gray rather than her usual commanding red, clenched her hands tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale. She rose suddenly, voice shaking with both fury and desperation. "I gave decades of loyalty. I endured scorn, ridicule, and exile from the public eye, all to stand here beside Charles. And now you would strip me of my place?" Her voice echoed through the chamber, but no one answered. The silence was worse than condemnation. It was abandonment. She looked at Charles, searching for defense, but his eyes would not meet hers. The council voted to limit her public role, effectively pushing her into the background of royal life. It was not exile, but it was humiliation. Storming from the chamber, her heels clattering against the polished floor, Camilla felt the walls of Buckingham close in like a prison. Behind the doors, William steadied himself against the table, his pulse thundering in his ears. He had not toppled her entirely, but he had secured a turning point. For the first time, the crown leaned toward his vision rather than hers. That night, night, Charles requested an unscripted broadcast. No advisors, no notes. Sitting beneath the glaring studio lights, he addressed the nation with a trembling sincerity few had ever seen. "I failed," he said, his voice raw. "I failed my wife, my sons, and you, the people. Silence became my refuge, but silence is no longer possible." He promised transparency, reform, and a future built on honesty. For a moment, Britain held its breath. Outside pubs, televisions flickered with his weary face. In living rooms, families sat in stunned quiet. Some mocked the late apology. Others wept at the vulnerability of a monarch stripped of armor. For the first time, a flicker of sympathy stirred where only resentment had lived. Months passed, and the monarchy began to bend rather than break. William and Catherine opened palace halls to charities and schools, transforming grandeur into service. Catherine became the visible face of compassion, while William launched the Royal Future Fund, aimed at reconnecting the monarchy with younger generations. Crowds that once jeered now applauded cautiously, testing the possibility of a new era. Yet beneath the progress, unease lingered. Camilla retreated to her Wiltshire estate, out of sight but not out of mind. Rumors swirled that she still plotted, still spoke to allies in hushed tones. The question of her return hung in the air like an unspoken threat. One autumn morning, Charles summoned William to St. George's Chapel. The light from the stained glass painted the walls in fractured colors. In his hands, the king held a small wooden box. Inside lay the sapphire from Diana's engagement ring, carefully removed from the crown itself. With trembling hands, Charles placed it in William's palm. "This is all I can give back to her," he whispered, tears clouding his eyes. "Do not wait as I did. Rebuild where I failed." William closed the box, his silence a vow stronger than words. The moment was not ceremony, it was confession, father to son. Weeks later, headlines revealed that Charles had diverted much of his personal wealth to establish the Princess Diana Foundation. It became one of the largest royal charities, aiding children and women across the globe. Critics still doubted, but the public slowly began to see him as more than the monarch who faltered, as a man seeking redemption, however late. A year later, the balcony of Buckingham Palace was alive with Union Jacks fluttering in the cold wind. William stood beside Catherine, their children at their side, the crowd below erupting in cheers rather than protests. The monarchy was not healed, but it was breathing again. William looked over the sea of faces, then turned to his wife. "Will it be enough?" he asked quietly. Catherine squeezed his hand, her voice firm. "It will not for the crown, but for the people and for your mother." Above them, clouds parted, a shaft of sunlight cutting through the gray, falling across the palace like a benediction. Somewhere unseen, Diana's spirit seemed to linger, her presence etched into the legacy her sons now carried forward.